So, my name is Chris Arnold, and I'm the chair of the Creative Writing Department here at St. Mary's, and it's a real honor to welcome you all here to our first event in the Visiting Writers Series for Spring 2025. Thank you all for being here. The rain let up just in time for today's event. We're hearing those sounds you hear, those beautiful sounds you hear. Lauren will tell us about those later. One thing we like to do is ask our visiting writers to provide some musical accompaniment or sonic accompaniment to the reading, and so take a moment to listen to those sounds. And to begin also, on this bright spring day after a storm, I do just want to share with a heavy heart the news that some of us heard this morning of the passing of Sky Ward, a longtime staff member and leader in the SEC Ethnic Studies Department, and in so many ways, the conscience of this institution. Today, I was planning to talk about visionary work in the context of Lauren's work, in the context of transit books, but I think that also applies to the work that Sky did here at St. Mary's, directing our attention and directing our hearts to what really matters. And for Sky, that was our students first and foremost. Dignity for all, opportunity for all. Sky was a historian of this campus, documenting student activities, documenting student advocacy, documenting student protests, amplifying student voices to faculty and administration, even and especially at times when maybe faculty and administration didn't want to hear those student voices. And so, I think we're all at a loss for words with the loss of Sky, but a more formal announcement will surely follow, as well as an announcement of an occasion to gather in Sky's memory. But Sky is here and is always going to be with us here in spirit. So I wanted to talk about visionary work today, because there was actually a time when visionary was in common usage as a way of praising an artist. But unfortunately, I don't think that word is used often enough these days. But I think we could all use more and better and clearer vision. And for that reason, I'm just honored to welcome 3 visionaries to our campus today to kick off the Spring 2025 Visiting Writer Series. Many of you already know and admire the writer Lauren Markham, who's returning this year to teach the Creative Nonfiction Craft Seminar and also co-direct our inaugural summer storyboard residency. With Lauren, I feel like we're catching a shooting star in near-Earth orbit. Her vision is keen and deeply humane. She asks us to pay attention to who and what we're paying attention to and why. Whether it's the people and the way people move over land and over sea, the way people are lost between lands and at sea, or even the way we look at birds and trees. And all along the way, she's looking at herself honestly and reflecting on her own agency and complicity in the poly-crisis of our times. Lauren has also somehow managed to capture a decade of literary accomplishment in less than 2 years. So last year, she published the wondrous work of hybrid nonfiction, A Map of Future Ruins with Riverhead, a book that the New Yorker described as a finely woven meditation on belonging, exclusion, and whiteness. Many writers would follow that up with a nap. Instead, Lauren brings us another marvelous work this year, in fact this week, published just yesterday, the book-length essay, Immemorial, a meditation on climate grief, creation, travel, work, parenthood, love, and loss, published just yesterday by Transit Books, and described by Kirkus in a starred review as an intimate meditation on the climate crisis. It takes vision to look unflinchingly at these subjects, and it takes vision to publish this kind of work. Transit Books, our other guest today, is a nonprofit publisher of international and American literature founded in 2015 by Ashley Nelson Levy and Adam Levy, who are with us here today, and then we'll be in conversation with Lauren. They used to be a small publishing house, publishing out of their actual house. But although their profile and accomplishments have grown, you can still find them at the Bay Area Book Festival and other fairs, peddling great books like Summer Squash and the Farmer's Market. So they're very much into hand-selling great literature, which I love. They believe in their books, they believe in their authors, they believe in their vision. So it was no small feat, but also no surprise, that they were the first English language publishers of the Norwegian playwright John Fosse, who went on to win the Nobel Prize, and threw the spotlight on transit. And as these things happen, they now have a big, beautiful space in Berkeley, which serves not only as their headquarters and bookshop, but also as a gathering place to celebrate great writing. And one of the most incredible series among their list of titles is the Undelivered Lecture Series, which Adam describes as an outlet for discursive prose of exceptional literary and cultural value that's more lasting than a magazine piece, but less substantial than a 300-page hardback. Undelivered Lectures is an opportunity to introduce readers to boundary-pushing works of narrative nonfiction, and Lauren's going to be reading from a title in that Undelivered Lectures series today. But if I may also make a plug for another transit project. Transit books, they also have a vision for the future and for the kinds of books that children should be reading and for the kinds of books that all of us should be reading. So they also have transit children's editions. They actually don't have blurbs, but I will give you a blurb from my daughter Nora, who blurbs "A giant on the shore" thusly: "What's that?" What's that? That is the animating curiosity that fires up Lauren Markham, and what I presume fires up Ashley and Adam at Transit Books. And I like to think that's the sort of question that fires up our community. What's that? And so Lauren is going to read briefly from her new book, followed by a conversation with Adam. So let's give them a big warm welcome to our campus.
Tell you what an honor it is to be here with you all and to get to work with just my long-term brother in arms, Chris, and so many other of the faculty members here, you wonderful students with Transit. It really, when Chris introduced me last year, really, it was so moving, and it really brought me to tears to just feel like my work and life project was being made legible by such a dear friend whose work I admire so much. And then I made him do it again this year, and he really just made me cry again. So thanks, Chris. I will not be publishing another book for a while, so I won't make you do that. So I'm going to read from this book, Immemorial, which was published by Transit Books. And I'll be talking during our event a little bit. It's published yesterday, yay. I'll be talking a little bit during our conversation after this about independent publishing, because this is my third book, but my first time working with an independent publisher, and I have so much to say about what a delight it is to have a book that is a work of art and curiosity first, and then a commercial object second. It's a pretty remarkable thing. So with that, I'm gonna start reading. So actually, I guess I should just say something. This is a book that is an inquiry and a lament into climate change. It's looking at climate grief, the failures of language during our age of climate catastrophe, and then it's looking to the art of memorial, sort of with some yearning of can you solve this for me? Can you help me metabolize this grief, and can you maybe help more of a collective do so? So I'm going to read a little bit here. One of the functions of a memorial is to offer a space for communal mourning and remembrance. Even if a person's memorial-induced catharsis takes place privately, it does so side by side with others. Such experiential companionship was another reason the memorial format was alluring to me. I know I'm not alone in my climate grief, or eco-grief, or eco-anxiety, as it's otherwise known. According to a recent Yale study, roughly 7% of US adults are experiencing some form of climate anxiety. Youth are hit worst of all. In a 2021 survey of 10 different countries, 60% of youth reported feeling very or extremely worried about the future of our planet. This worry, many said, affected their ability to function in their daily lives. Part of the trouble with metabolizing climate grief is that to do so requires grieving many abstractions at once. A person grieves the species and landscapes and people, both dear and unknown to them, that the Anthropocene has fundamentally altered or destroyed. There's also the painful truth to grieve that humans are the ones to blame here, and the powerlessness one may feel in the face of the machinery causing climate catastrophe is also freighted with grief. And then there's that particularly unsteady, ghostly form of anticipatory grief for losses that are once certain. We know that glaciers will melt, and that the sea will rise, and that the forest will burn, and yet not fully known in terms of their timeline or precise manifestation. The nature and scope of future devastation is contingent upon what action is taken, which brings a person back to the confounding, grief-stricken collision course between one's sense of personal responsibility for the future and powerlessness over it. It takes some time coming to truths with the simultaneous fact that we are small amid the mighty forces of destruction, and also capable of affecting change, that things are dire but not all hope is lost, that we are living through apocalypse and a time of great possibility all at once. It can be dizzying to hold all of these things, and the grief itself can get in the way. It's also disorienting to move through a transfiguring world. I ate a cough drop that is now stuck on the roof of my mouth, so this is why I'm talking to somebody. You don't understand it front. No, I'm good. I'm just going to chew it out. I got it. I just needed to come sing with you guys. Oh, what's going on? Okay, we're back. It's also disorienting to move through a transfiguring world. Not long ago, when I was 6 months pregnant, my partner and I flew to southern Mexico to spend some time at the beach. We stayed a few miles up the coast from a steady surf break with a lip you could ride all the way to the shore. Our rental was paradise in the most prototypical postcard sense of the word. Silhouettes of gently bending palm trees, a view of the ocean and its blush-colored sunsets, a thatched roof, our open-air bedroom allowing the sound of the sea's effervescence to cradle us through the night. The first morning, Ben left before daybreak to greet the waves, and I got up a few hours later, meeting a sky so broad and bright that it was as if someone had flung the shutters open upon the entire universe, letting in all the light. I headed to the beach. It was indeed beautiful, but I noted something strange about the water. The sand was covered with a rust-colored foam. I scurried uphill with each wave to avoid the frothy heaps. And then I almost stepped on a dead pufferfish lying on the sand. It was bloated, its skin distended like a spiked tooth-like balloon. Because its eyes were popped wide open, the creature gave the appearance of looking both shocked and ready to explode. I was so taken with this one dead fish that it took me a while to notice one just a few feet away, and then another, and then another. I scanned the beach. There were hundreds of these aquatic corpses scattered upon the sand far into the distance, as though someone had detonated a bomb in the shallows. It wasn't just pufferfish, but also torpedo-shaped creatures the length of my forearm with snouts like bayonets, gleaming silver flounders, a speckled fellow smaller than my palm, whose lips were fixed in a cartoonish pucker. The waves tossed the pufferfish, and I avoided these cadavers as though they were both precious objects I might break and deadly landmines. But even so, I nearly walked across a 4-foot nurse shark, curled sagged and dead upon the sand. Like I had once done above Greenland and the Alps, I took out my phone. It was pure instinct. I snapped a picture after picture, unable to stop myself from adjusting the dead fish within the frames, leaning and bending for the right angle, settling down upon my knees. There was something sacrilegious about it, and I was aware of the screen's utility in both connecting me to and distancing me from death. The particular deaths right before me, and whatever deadly force had scattered them on the beach. A red tide, it turned out. It had recently swept the coast of Guerrero. Climate change causes a warming sea in which toxic algae can bloom suddenly and far more frequently, suffocating the creature that made the sea their home. It would be months before I looked at the pictures of the dead fish, but I didn't delete them. They were stored alongside so many other ghosts, photos I'd taken of the fire-charred hillsides of the Sierra not far from where I live, the piles of plastic fishermen pulled into their nets from the Aegean in Greece, the destroyed barn I once saw in Vermont after Hurricane Irene, sliced from its home along the riverbanks and deposited hundreds of yards downstream as if a severed body, nerve endings still wriggling. I had long feared that my instinctual desire to record the ravages of climate change was a ghoulish effort to capture, in the rough language of social media, and to use what I caught to perform feelings for others, not merely as an act of showmanship, but out of a failure to sort out how to adequately feel and what to do about it. But now I was beginning to suspect that this instinct was something more complex, an almost biological impulse to record what was becoming invisible, not all that distinct from my impulse for memorial. It seemed to me that my photographs were, in part, a gesture toward action, something to do rather than just something to feel. Could grief be a raw material of creation? Could memories of the vanishing world be not merely vessels for grief, but an alchemical force to transform that grief into something else? Writing for me had always been that vessel, but the container wasn't working like it used to, as if its latch had broken or its bottom panel had warped and cracked. Sentences had once come so easily, but now I grasped the right words. There didn't seem to be enough of them. When I turned in a draft about imperiled forests to an editor, he pointed out that I'd used the word vast 15 times. The root problem seemed to be a matter of faith. On my most doleful days, I questioned what words could accomplish at all, and, if anything, whether it would be nearly fast enough. What good were words when the world was burning? These questions had always been lurking in the corner, but now they crouched upon my shoulders each time I sat down at my desk. It was beginning to feel like anything I wrote about climate change or other urgent social matters was either a feeble finger wag or merely a double underline, a reminder of things everybody already knew. It was destabilizing to have my medium turn against me like this, or me it. And it wasn't just the act of writing, it was also words themselves. What did it mean that my ordering principles no longer functioned as such? The places I went, words, books, to most deeply feel were vanishing in substance, like the fish. Semantic satiation is the term for that unnerving occurrence when a word, having been looked at or considered for too long, ceases to hold any meaning, becoming essentially gobbledygook, mush. See, pufferfish, future, future, future. Words were not only losing their power, but also their meaning. They were disintegrating all around me, item by item, and feeling by feeling, fish by fish by fish.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Chris, and thank you for that lovely reading.
Yeah.
It's interesting that that's the section you read.
I know, I thought of this actually mid-reading, I was like, funny. Okay, we'll tell you why in a second.
Well, this wasn't where I was going to start the
Oh, okay.
No, but
Okay.
let's start
go.
it there because it's about beginnings in a way.
Yeah.
Lauren tried on several occasions to make this
The first part of the book.
first part of the book. It was
That scene, the pufferfish scene explicitly.
maybe talk us through
Yeah.
that writing process and
Yeah.
maybe even also that impulse. I'm curious why you chose
He
to
is
write.
setting up an amazing spike where he did like a great edit. And that's what he's setting up
Just
here.
All of my questions are about
How great.
how great that is. It's like, what,
Talk us through that.
how much
I wanna
better did the book become?
Yeah. Okay, this was one of the best edits I've gotten, like, ever. And I'm gonna say, I'll just send that to that, okay? Is that okay?
It's working.
Okay, it really was. So I one of the reasons I wanted to read this today, if it wasn't clear, is because it's a section explicitly about the power of language and that crisis of utility. Is writing action? Does it mean anything? Does it do anything? And sort of particularly outlining that crisis. So that's why I started with this section today. However, I initially started the book with the one time I went to Mexico and I experienced a fish massacre, and I think there was words like weeping in there and all of this stuff. And Adam had this really, really insightful and kind of gentle touch edit where he was like, I'm not sure this is where the book wants to start. I'm wondering if it could start with actually your search for a word, which is now where it does start. So where the book starts now is the actual beginning of the book is my taking this photo above Greenland and then getting this weird comment on Instagram by an organization called the Bureau of Linguistical Reality that turns out to be these Bay Area artists who help make words. And so it starts with my reaching out to them and my desire to find a word. That was Adam's idea. But I think one of the things that but I think what we got to, and the reason why the pufferfish didn't work as a beginning for the book, although I'd be interested to hear your memory of our conversation of this and what you think, but what became so clear to me through Adam's insight here was that what I was basically trying to do at the beginning of this book is prove that climate change was super sad. I was trying to make a point and make a case, which, I don't know, that was what Silent Spring had to do in the 70s. We're past that. Do you know what I mean? This moment does not need, no one needs to be no one doesn't have some touchstone either in their own lives or somewhere in the world that they've closely watched or known of some ravage of climate change. So I think I was trying to prove this point, and once you made me see that, it was so helpful to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that it works really well here because you also make some really nice connections into it that follow, but I think one of the things initially that gave me pause was that it's very personally fraught, the problem that it introduces in terms of the personal relationship to the impacts of climate catastrophe, but it didn't introduce immediately something that is another preoccupation of the book, which is the lexically fraught relationship between you and writing and climate catastrophe and the effects that that has on your work and how you view all of those things.
Totally, yeah. Right on it.
Where I was hoping to begin was your interest in memorials.
Yeah.
I mean, in preparation for this conversation, I went back and looked at our...
I'm terrified. You looked at the proposal? No, I haven't looked at it because it's like too terrifying to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the proposal was also like a second stage. I mean, just some brief background about how we do this series. When we first started it, because we're often working with writers who are published by major commercial houses, we approach them directly rather than waiting for something to come to us on submission, and we'll write them and just see if they might be interested in stretching their legs a little bit in this new form that's slightly out of the wheelhouse of a lot of those commercial houses that publish their regular work. So when I reached, so I guess, which is a long way of saying, all of these books, with one or two exceptions, are commissions essentially, where we don't have a manuscript that we're looking at and then thinking, okay, cool, let's accept this, let's put in an offer on this book, let's publish it. It begins as a conversation, which in publishing terms is a huge risk, because you're basically saying, hey, we're gonna pay you this chunk of money, even if in the scheme of publishing, it's not a huge chunk of money. We're still saying, can you write this thing that we hope is great and believe that we together can make great, but also no promises, because we don't know what the thing is going to be. So when I was looking back at our earlier conversations, and some of these are in notes that are in an older notebook that I couldn't find, but we had a conversation where we were talking about even just what the book could be, and you had several different ideas, and then we finally settled on memorials. So I'm curious, and that first sample included a description of you as a kid going to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. So what was your interest in them? What drew you to this subject? And then we could talk about what came after.
I mean, I think the initial horror I was just expressing was like, this is so different than the initial proposal. And that just makes me feel funny, even though I think it's much better than like what I had anticipated or imagined. I think one of the things about this form and this process that was so thrilling as a writer is that they were inviting me to kind of propose effectively like a half-baked idea and try to bake it, and that it wasn't one that was like, how are we going to sell this book to 200,000 people? Do you know what I mean? Like, really great. I mean, no one would be mad if this book sold 200,000 copies. Tell your friends. But like, that wasn't it wasn't like marketability, you know, kind of making the case for like big market wasn't there. It was like the first impulse it seemed to me was like, I feel like you asked this specifically, like, what is something you're thinking about? Is there a piece that you worked on that you want to do more on? Like, is there something you want to expand? Do you have like some obsession or preoccupation? And that was just like really thrilling to get to think into that. Because, you know, Chris and I talk a lot about this in kind of like nonfiction and journalism world, like a pitch can't be a topic, memorials. A pitch has to be, they're building a memorial in Santa Rosa to the fire that happened there, and there's this particular conflict in XYZ. I don't think there's a conflict in that, by the way, just by way of example. And whereas like, I feel like what you were inviting was like topic and then trying to concretize the topic, which was really nice. And memorials are always something I've been really fascinated with, in part because I've done so much work in human rights issues like all around the world, and so I've visited a lot of them, both here and like internationally, and I've just been really struck by the way a physical space can induce feeling, like without language. So I wanted to learn more about the art of memorial, and I wanted to write about it, but it actually wasn't until I actually started writing it that the kind of environmental lens came in. Like that wasn't initially a part of it, which is now like the core of it. Maybe that's also why I wanted to start with the pufferfish, because maybe, and now I'm thinking about it, maybe I was making a case to you in my head of like why this had changed.
Yeah, I mean, in that original structure, and this is also what excited me most, and this is also, I feel like, as an editor, a really important thing to let, the way that you need to let your author lead, because in a way, I was more interested in what you were originally proposing when we first talked, which was kind of like a study of memorials.
Yeah.
Did I just go out for a second?
No, I hear you.
Which was a study of memorials, a kind of an overview of how memorials function,
Yeah.
their architecture, their the relationship to the way that people move through these public spaces,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. But then when you sent in a draft, you're like, actually this ended up being
Something
kind of
totally
different thing.
Yeah.
So just curious,
Yeah, what happened?
how did the writing of the book and your research for the book change your
Yeah.
understanding of what a memorial is?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it's like part of it was my ignorance going into it. Like I was like, I'm going to do this whole taxonomy of memorials, and I'm going to create these categories of what memorials are and what they do, and I'm going to study like how they work. And then I'm like, oh, there's actually like a lot written about this. Do you know what I mean? Like, like it wasn't. So it's like I'm reading all of these brilliant. There's this one book called Memorial Mania that's so excellent about you know, the like big boom in memorializing and sort of like the cultural functions of that. It's an academic book, but it's like incredibly well done. And so I sort of read that and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do like this light. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that was part of it, that the more research I did, I felt as though like, I didn't feel like as though I necessarily had something to add there. And then I also felt like, and maybe part of this, I will say, I think when I pitched this, you only had 2 lectures out. I think it was Namwali Serpel's Stranger Faces, and then Mary Capello's lecture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It was 2021, I saw
Yeah.
on our email.
Yeah.
And Lauren was also a writer who I didn't know personally. I just wrote out of the blue, and I guess it's been basically 4 years since that process, from like the actual inception of the idea of the possibility of a project to the publication. And
this.
book in front of a room of people.
Yeah, and I think that maybe I felt a little bit, because I didn't have as many models, I felt a little bit like, oh, this should be more academic because it's a lecture and it should be more brain, like, and then Migratory Birds came out, was that the 3rd in the series maybe? Yeah. And it was so beautiful by, who wrote that?
Mariana Oliver.
Yeah, Mariana Oliver. It's such a beautiful book. And I was like, oh, like it's super lyric, these like lyric interludes about migration. I think that maybe cracked something open to me, and like, oh, there isn't this mandate. And also, truly, and just like thinking about memorials, and the more I researched them, when I was thinking of my own sort of grief, like the thing that was very big for me at that time was like climate grief, you know, and still is. And so I was finding myself sort of doing this more academic inquiry while also having these feelings that needed a place to go. So I think it was the research kind of opened up I guess my deeper, more emotional preoccupations and like how those could map to the intellectual ones.
Also going back in time, I liked going through this little email rabbit hole, because I found this.
It doesn't forget.
When you sent me an email at one point, you wrote, I'm wondering what you think we should say, read the title. I'm so at a loss. Any thoughts? And in that email you suggested morning songs.
Yeah.
And I was on this kick, and remain on this kick, that every title should always just be one word.
Yeah.
And I was like, it needs to be Memorial.
Yeah.
Don't push back on this.
Yeah.
No, there was another book out.
There was another one called Death Mask. That was what I wanted to call it.
Yeah, this is.
Sorry, I blew your joke.
It's not in the email, because we went out to lunch, and then you suggested Death Mask. Because my email
was like, it's like the first time we're ever meeting. He's like, no.
But then I only remember that because the follow-up email, you said, well, if not Death Mask, how about Death Mask for the future? And I'm also cherry-picking all of the worst title ideas that we came up with. Then Life Masks, Lamentations, Remaining Departed, and then we kind of were like, I was hoping that if we didn't talk about it, it would just end up being
Immemorial.
And then you sent over a new draft. You didn't even mention that you changed the title. I just saw it in the naming convention, like in the file name, and I was like, genius.
Nailed it.
Oh, good.
But that actually did come, so like part of the book is like doing, working with that wacky group called the Bureau of Linguistical Reality, and then doing my own kind of like wordplay work around neologisms, which is like the kind of, coining new words. And part of that is play, and is sort of play with words and suffixes and prefixes and roots and sonic resonance. Immemorial was sort of in my kind of wacky searching. I was like, wait a second, that's a good title. And it's one word, and I'm gonna be stoked.
I was very happy with that. I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of we've been talking a lot about the creation of the book.
Yeah.
Some of it's, we're talking around some of its themes, but I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about some of these animating questions that you followed throughout the book. And kind of where it took you. Because I feel like one of the nice things about this form, I think, I pulled this little quote from this book, the first book that we did called Lecture, One Word by Mary Capello, which is on the lecture. It was meant to be like a kind of, not a manifesto, but the closest thing that we come to that kind of stuff.
Call to arms around the lecture.
She describes an ambition to restore the lecture's affiliation with the essay, to revalue wandering ways, to court the counterintuition of going on a journey with a wandering guide. And in many ways, I feel like this memorial was the thing that you were following, and then reporting back on all of the ephemera and the marginal and all of the things that you encountered along the way.
Yeah, totally. I really love reading books, and like my last 2 books that I've written have been books like really animated by questions. And I would say some of the central preoccupations starting out were, firstly, like what is a memorial and how is it built, and like sort of what are all the politics behind it being built, but also how actually do designers come up with a physical space that moves people to understand and feel with like very limited and no language. Like how does that work? As someone who like my material is words, like how do those sorcerers do it with no words, That's one preoccupation. Another one is like, what do we do with our grief? Like how do we not get so stuck in it that it immobilizes us? How though do we also not like leapfrog over it and ignore it? Because I don't think that's good for us individually or collectively. Helping grief become fuel. And I was also interested in like, why is language failing me personally? What is the power of language? What do we make of language? And how might we need to revive language for myself personally, and maybe like even collectively, for it to be of use and more deeply felt again? Like basically, why am I feeling more when I go into like some of these memorial spaces than I am when I'm like, writing or sometimes reading? Like what's happening?
Can you describe some of those memorials? One of my favorite ones, and somehow feels like the closest thing to like a plot twist that happens in the book. Because there's this early description of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and the really fascinating history of how it came about, how it came to be designed by Maya Lin, who makes this appearance later on when you discover that this memorial installation is also designed by Maya Lin all of these years later. So good.
It was like, I was like, gosh, gee whiz, are there like any memorials to climate change out there? That would be so great. And it's like, Maya Lin made one. And you're like, oh. She's like the torchbearer for sort of what is considered the like contemporary memorial, which is not figurative in nature, but more the sort of symbolic space that you kind of step into. So she took 49 dead white Atlantic cedars from the New Jersey Pine Barrens and brought them up to a park in Manhattan and installed them there. So like as if they were living trees, except for they were dead trees. And she installed them there for exactly 1 year so that as the sort of seasons happened around in the living park, the sort of dead trees stayed the same. Although actually she found herself really interested to see that they actually didn't stay the same. In death, they were taking on new form, which was kind of really interesting. I really loved that one. Let's see, there was actually a memorial. Lacey Johnson wrote really beautifully about it in the New Yorker. There was the people of Iceland, or hundreds of people of Iceland gathered to hold an actual memorial for a glacier. It was the first glacier to be decommissioned as a glacier. That was really interesting. What was playing actually, I listened to this a lot weirdly when I was pregnant, but was this album called Songs of Disappearance, where these artists kind of collected all of these extinct and endangered bird songs and compiled them together into music, which I found really incredible. And then the artist, there's another one, Jason DeCaires Taylor, who installs these creates these sculptures in his studio in London and then installs them throughout the world in various places where the coral reefs have been bleached out. And over time, the coral comes back and the sea life repopulates them. So there are these incredible forms that, these bleached white sculptures that then become new with life in ways that he can't anticipate. Those are some of the ones I found that were really cool.
Yeah, I really love those. It feels like it's it's obviously an animating preoccupation of yours, but it also is something that I feel like the book itself, I think one of the really amazing and impressive things that you accomplished is the book itself becomes a memorial of its own, in the sense that it's a space it's a psychic space for feeling, something you move through, that you move into, and it's an occasion, it's a vessel, it's a place where you're reflecting, but it's also something that, and I think this is a lot of what your work more generally is too, it's a call to arms. It introduces the idea and the possibility and the will to take action in the world. So I guess I'm curious whether you felt like that was something that you were creating, or whether that was just something that is a natural component of anything that you're working on. And then kind of I'm going to ask 3 huge questions.
I'm following, I got it.
Also, how writing this in particular feels like a departure, if it does, or an extension of your other work. You do so much journalistic work and much longer narrative nonfiction work. And of thinking about, you're not going to be able to follow all 3 questions, and I'm not going to remember them.
I got it. We're gonna get there.
Well, someone from the audience will have to ask.
I would say that, did I experience myself making a psychic space for feeling for someone else? Did I experience making no, and that was actually a really lovely line comment that you had, this book is kind of a memorial, and I was like, ooh, I love that. Yay, that would be wonderful. But I do think that anytime, we as writers are writing deeply and genuinely and with clarity and also kind of self-criticality, really trying to see the bare truth and of our own experience and feeling, truly what is it, what are its contours, and trying to look at it from all angles. I do find that when I am writing from that space, I tend to write things that other people can relate to more, and when I'm sticking more in my brain, or what I think what I think I'm supposed to be writing, or when I'm just dutifully doing the job at hand, it is work that people tend to connect to less, and I do think that so anyway, that's some maybe writing advice, that if you're writing from your own, really honestly from your own preoccupations, I think that can be moving and interesting to other people in ways that are surprising. Multiple people, really dear friends of mine, have been this is my favorite thing you've ever written. And I'm really? what? Like, I truly thought I was writing something that, like, I was very proud of, but, like, that was, like, a little esoteric and, like, not maybe for everybody, you know what I mean? And maybe it's not for everybody, but I was surprised to hear that from Brent.
People love esoteric.
You heard it here. You heard it here. And then how is it a departure from other work? I don't know, I think that, like, there is definitely, like, A Map of Future Ruins, my last book, is much more animated by questions, but it is more narrative, and there's much more, like, policy questions. So I think this book, this form, this length, I do feel like I could kind of, like, I don't know, like, pull the ripcord a little bit and just be like, I don't have to, like, is that the right, no, I don't think that, like, let it rip, I don't know. I didn't have, like, a duty to be like, you have to stay with me, whatever, you have to stay with me for, like, 100, or for, like, 300 pages, and, like, I have to write something that demands that, and it was a book that I feel like could just entirely be, like, a book of questions, that there was, so, of course, I had to figure out structure and, like, some narrative threads, but there was such an opportunity in this length, in this form, and with you all as editors to, like, not have a pressure for, like, to make this in some way, like, a page turner or, like, a dutiful work of nonfiction, which I did feel to some extent in The Map of Future Ruins, that I had to make it longer than I wanted it to be, and I had to make it, like, track as serious journalism in a way.
I'm curious, since this is a new format, at least, for you to be working in, if there were any kind of guides, literary guides that you were either maybe writing toward or writing away from, what were you reading while outside of your research, what were you reading or thinking about?
That's such a great question. I definitely was reading a number of, like, shorter books, like novellas. This was for research, but Daisy Hildyard's book, The Second Body, was, like, a real, like, touchstone for this one. This question is so hard for me because I just shut down and have never read a book. I'm also having to, like, track backwards a little bit, and partially I was writing this, like, when A Map of Future Ruins, when I was writing, you know, sort of, like, toggling back and forth between those at different periods. John Berger, like, a lot of the work of John Berger, like, his essays and criticism. Hilton Als, like, so I think I was reading, like, some long, thoughtful, more meandering criticism, which I found really useful, because part of a real struggle I had with this was, like, how do you describe physical space? How do you describe art, like, while keeping people interested? Like, I cannot show you the Jason DeCaires Taylor, you know, like, one wants to just, like, stick a picture in there, but actually I have to describe it. That's the like, underwater sculptures. And so how do you, like, shortly and concisely, but, like, vividly describe, like, the physical world? So I think I was really looking to critics for that, and I think John Berger and Hilton Als do that really beautifully.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can see those kind of markers in the text. You could have also put pictures in there.
I know, but it felt
as long as the permissions weren't expensive.
You would have let me. But it did feel like it's like, okay, look, I have, the job is to try this on my own beforehand. Did you know what I mean? Because I feel like if I had let myself, like, believe the pictures were possible, I would have just been like, see below, you know? Yeah.
We have a lot of books in the series that use pictures. But I mean, the writers don't just say see below. I mean, sometimes.
Yeah. No, of course.
Really,
this is not.
You could have tried a little bit.
Yeah, there's not knocking pictures. I just, you know, I do feel like, yeah. Can I ask you a question that I think, can you talk about, like, how your press formed and why, like, and what it is that, like, you felt like you all were, like, what space you were opening for work, and just, like, for folks who might be newer to publishing and book publishing, like, why were you guys like, we have to exist?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, in a way, it feels like such a long time ago that it's hard to remember, like, us as little babies starting
Wasn't it only like 10 years ago?
No, I know, but we didn't know what we were doing.
Right, no, totally. I'm just like, it wasn't that long. Like, that's the amazing thing. It's our 10-year anniversary this year.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Ashley and I, we were working in publishing in New York briefly. We were also in an MFA program when we met, studying fiction. Ashley is herself a fiction writer.
Brilliant novelist. Immediate Family is her novel. Read it, it's so good.
And at the time I was also working as a translator and kind of learning about more of the theoretical possibilities within translation. And so it wasn't until I kind of fell in with a group of translators and then simultaneously was working in publishing that I started to realize how much stuff was out there that was really good, but just not finding a home at the houses that I think you're accustomed to hearing about and seeing work from, or getting reviewed, or getting the kind of coverage that is really necessary to make a book work. So when we left New York, we moved out here where Ashley is from originally, and we kind of felt, it was something that we had talked about and kind of kicked around the idea of what this could look like, but it wasn't until we came out here that we really felt like we had the space, not an actual office space, but kind of like the psychic space for starting a press. And
also that you weren't like sort of like in the hustle of the New York thing, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether it would have happened if we had stayed in New York and stayed being like assistant level positions, for 5 years. But we just started, the first thing we did really was to start writing to translators and said, do you happen to be sitting on any work that you've sent out that the commercial houses are finding too long, too short, too strange, too something, too hard to publish for whatever reason? And I was really surprised. In the same way, we got similar reactions when we started writing to people about the Undelivered Lectures series. People would be like, yeah, actually I have like this book that I really love that no one wants to publish. And we'd read it, kind of expecting it to be like, oh, well, that's why. But it was great. And this stuff was just, at these houses, I mean, this is part of a much larger story of publishing in the US and internationally over the last century, where these corporate houses, as a result of, decades of conglomeration and increased pressure from shareholders to hit sales targets and blah, blah, blah. That's a whole other conversation. Really, they need a book, they need most of their books to perform in a certain kind of way, and taking a risk on a translation when you maybe have read, if you don't read in that language, acquiring a book, commissioning a translation when you've read 20 pages of a sample and maybe commissioned to read a report on it. I mean, it's a huge financial risk. But for us, I mean, you can feel it in the voice, you can feel it on the page within the first paragraph where this thing is going. And at least we've published at this point about 60 books. And I feel like anytime we've had some like inkling when we're kind of testing the ground, feeling how our footing is the ground kind of soft? Is the ground just giving way? Like, is anything that we're sensing usually is amplified over the course of a 250-page book? So when you feel something that is just like the ground is solid, the voice is there, this is something fresh, this is something that is exciting to us, and that even based on these 20 pages, I would love to get in the hands of a reader who's like, nothing excites me right now. That is our animating force, at least when we're thinking about acquiring things. And I think we've been very fortunate because, since we started publishing, we've just had really great momentum behind the books that we put out. And I think it's unusual for presses of our size to have that kind of trajectory, and hopefully it continues, because I mean, as a small press of our size, you really do need to catch all the breaks, and some of the breaks have been really good.
The Nobel Prize.
Yeah, that's been really nice, and it's been really helpful.
Little break.
Yeah, it's a great break, but you need to keep, not that you need to publish a Nobel Prize every year, but I wouldn't be mad if it happened.
And then can you talk about, we sort of mentioned like why the undelivered, or like Chris sort of mentioned it in like what you said about the undelivered lectures, but like what made you, this was the first, that you did not in translation or not from foreign rights, right? Like you did some English speaking ones, like I'm thinking Axiomatic.
Yeah, we everything was international at that point. I think from the beginning, and it's always been in our mission that we publish international and American literature, and I think we were trying to, you know, create the books that we wanted to see in the world, essentially. So we had this kind of hunger and curiosity for, I mean, we also love the potential and possibility within, you know, hybrid nonfiction forms. And there are a lot of really great presses that have done work that has been really inspiring for us in that space. But I think for us, we wanted to find a way to kind of like have the entire essence of the transit vision and publishing ethos essentially distilled into this one series that we were largely creating. It was a mix of Anglophone and international authors that it allowed us to kind of play formally to take, if we were creating a vessel, that vessel could also be capacious enough to hold really different kinds of things. And, you know, we're always working on them so far in the future. So like, and we have a lot of them in really different stages, or some people are, you know, we have really different processes for all of these. So like Lauren, who's just like a pro, just like turn the book in.
And in a totally different book than originally proposed.
But I mean, for some of them, we really work them up into shape. So like, people are sending us 20 pages at a time, we're doing notes, kind of stuff. Like, it's a really involved process. And to me, that is also kind of putting the editorial back into publishing, and something that you often see kind of getting pulled out of.
Can you say more about that, like more explicitly, because it's so true?
Yeah, I mean, I don't
say it, Adam. Name names.
I mean, I think there's
because of the pressures of on big house editors.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's really important to be able to show that kind of work, and it's not about just like making sure that everything is super clean and, you know, proofread well without any errors. I mean, that's obviously important, but just showing what's possible in terms of that even collaborative effort. And there are varying degrees of it. There have been lectures that we really have hardly touched, and it's just, and that too is part of the editing process, just really trying to understand and help an author realize their vision on the page. And sometimes that's for us really stepping back, and that's fine too.
Not all books get edited. That's, you know, like, and I'll say it, but these books get edited. One thing I wanted to say just really quick about the gift of like the, you know, international literature and literature and translation, just that feels so important. It's like this treasure trove that you're like opening for folks. You know, that gift of getting to read something that was in another language. I think of like, you know, I read Anna Matuta's The Island. Actually, Aishigul Sabash recommended it to me, and now Ben is reading it every night. He's like, oh my God, my husband, he's like, I think that's the best book I ever read. You know, it's like, where are her other books in English? You know, like I'm like scouring the earth for them. It's like such a gift to feel like you're reading something, you know, in another language. But the writer Naomi Williams, she has this like really funny that I love so much. This syllabus plan that I have like adopted as a reading strategy, and often, although I realize I didn't do it on my own syllabus for this semester, but I'm going to rectify that. She has like, you know, that wedding thing where you're like supposed to wear something new, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. So she reads, like, all of her syllabi have, like, new work, old work, borrowed work as in literature and translation, and then she's like, and then I assigned something sad, which I think is funny. I'm like, or they're not, most books sad. But anyway, I just think it's been really helpful to me as, like, a reader to rotate through and have, like, at least every fourth or fifth book be one in translation, because you just get to, like, experience, I don't know, any rut of reading that you're falling into because of like the whims of contemporary US publishing, like you're out of it if you read something in translation, and that's such a gift. So thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I also want to say, just as a kind of like counter-argument, which is maybe also an argument against myself in a way, that there is a real selection bias that happens here, which is not to say that anything that is international and then translated is inherently, more avant-garde, more interesting.
Yeah.
And that it's kind of interesting when you go to the international big book rights fairs, which we go to, and you'll see like the same kind of like romanticy, and not to knock that, it's great if you want to read that. I also read it. But you see that from all of the commercial houses Penguin Random House is owned by a German multinational corporation. The same principles, and I guess this is just like because capitalism exists everywhere, and I think it's because of much more like structural issues and just risks inherent to publishing that what we see in translation is really like the broccoli of books.
I want the hat transit publishing the broccoli.
Because if you go to Germany, say like the books that they translate into German are the like schlock of the U.S. market or of other international markets. So it's not to say that there's an inherent good in translation, but I do think that yes, you're right, and also
not always.
We're both right.
We have time for maybe a burning question from the audience.
Right.
If there is a burning question from the audience. Or a burning comment.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's quite a burning question.
Okay, we'll take it.
I'm curious, hearing you both talk about the process with this book and how it evolved, both from a writer's perspective and an editorial perspective. How do you trust that process, I guess, as the book evolves, and also how do you fall into what it's becoming? Does that make sense, almost from a craft perspective? Because I feel like emotionally that's one thing that you kind of get there, where you're like, okay, I'm letting go, but then sometimes it can be hard to step into a new space for a project that you hadn't foreseen, especially when you have pressure on it. So I'm curious how that process was, and if you have any insights.
I do feel like I had to test it out on the page before I went to Adam and Ashley to be like, my idea's a little different. But I do think that for me, it was just following what was interesting to myself and just knowing very, just in my bones that if something is boring to me, it's, if I'm trying to light myself up about something, or the writing is feeling dutiful, not like my original idea was boring, but it wasn't alive, and I could feel that kind of in my sensibility as I was going to write it, and I was researching, again, largely because I would read something and be like, that's such a more beautiful and astute and complete thought than what I've had. I can't, so then I'm in dialogue with that text, and that text is bolstering me to kind of take that thinking and go elsewhere as opposed to stay with the original thought. So I think part of it is just knowing it's definitely going to be if you're feeling drab about your own ideas, you're not going to fool anybody else, and then also just where you feel lit up in writing something, I think then there's a possibility there, not to say it's a definite, but there's a possibility there of lighting up someone else as a reader. I remember at I think the only AWP I've ever been to, except for this year, George Saunders did a really great like keynote or whatever, and he was talking about when he reads his own work, he like imagines this little meter on top of his head that goes like this, and when he's reading, it's like interesting, boring, and like anytime that he starts to go that way, he's like, okay, gotta like attend to this, and I really think it's true. Like I think you can read your own work with that. Like if you're starting to get bored, like I don't know, get a snack, take a nap, then like go back to it. But if it's happening again, like something's amiss, you know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, and I think that the editor's job is similar. I mean, because you are that reader essentially,
Right.
and you're trying to imagine yourself being that reader as well, and you're sensing kind of where the writer might be losing interest, or maybe where the writer needs to devote more attention or focus or whatever it might be. And then I think in terms of just my own strategy for that, it's really just to be as transparent and honest as possible. So really just to try to communicate that stuff. So I mean, I've recently started like, in the margins, I'm always like noting when I even like kind of chuckle to myself.
Nice.
And I get do like a little exclamation point. And I don't know exactly, there's a hierarchy there in how hard, but I think that it's kind of like the signpost maybe for the writer, like, oh, this
I'm
this
here.
joke is one
Here with you.
this thing is funny, this thing is,
Or like sometimes it's like, wow, or like, no way, like was one of them, and you're like, yes, like, I'm no way, you know.
I try to be now just like very, like, emotionally on the page.
Yeah, it's so helpful, because you need that, it's hard to do for yourself.
This is what I know we could ask you many more questions, but I want to make sure that we have time to peruse the many books from the list that you brought. Can we just get a huge round of applause?
Thank you.